Welcome to Andy Grinstead's presentation, Project Wingspan and Community Engagement. So my name is Bill Daniels, and I'm the program leader for Native Seed Communities, which is a project of the Indiana Native Plant Society. And I'm very glad you've joined us for Andy Grinstead's presentation, Project Wingspan and Community Engagement. Before we introduce Andy, I'd like to share with you some information on Native Seed Communities. Native Seed Communities promotes networks of native plant enthusiasts working together regionally to acquire, to process, and to propagate native plant seeds to increase the presence of these ecologically appropriate native plants in all of our landscapes. Our presentations, such as tonight, are devoted to discussing the propagation of native plants from seeds and the spotlighting of organizations and individuals that mobilize native plant enthusiasts to use these seed-grown plants in their local landscapes. We have a lot of resources on our Indiana Native Plant Society's website, an active Facebook group, YouTube channel with a playlist dedicated to Native Seed Communities, an Instagram account, and a Trello board with not only our presentations, but additional information on our speakers, their handouts, and other seed-related information. We'll share these links and other resources in the chat. All right, let me introduce Andy. Andy is the Project Wingspan Program Manager at Pollinator Partnership. He is originally from Indiana and is excited to return to the place that first sparked his excitement for conservation. Andy earned a bachelor's in outdoor recreation and resource management from Indiana University and a master's of ecological restoration from Colorado State University. After completing 2 terms with AmeriCorps NCCC, he worked with a variety of nonprofit organizations, consulting firms, land trusts, and local, state, and federal agencies to accomplish all facets of natural resources management. He has worked in the North Woods of Minnesota, Great Plains of the Dakotas, mountains and foothills of Colorado, expansive deserts of New Mexico, and cascading gorges of upstate New York. A common theme throughout his career has been community engagement and volunteerism in support of natural resource management initiatives. And he joined Pollinator Partnership in March 2023, and is excited to share his enthusiasm for plants, pollinators, and human connection with the community. I now give you Andy Grinstead.
Hi everyone. Thanks for joining. Oh, sorry, I should probably share my screen, before we get going.
That sounds good.
1 minute. All right, can you see the slideshow?
Sure can.
Perfect. So thanks for joining the conversation. I'm excited to talk about Project Wingspan with Pollinator Partnership. I'm basically just thrilled that you're interested in making a positive impact for pollinators. As Bill mentioned, I'm Andy Grinstead, the Program Manager for Project Wingspan. And today I'll give an overview of the various initiatives that we have going on and the accomplishments before discussing how you can get involved yourself. To quickly tell you about myself, I'm definitely not an expert on entomology. Neither am I an expert on all things pollinators. I do come from a background in plants and vegetation management, and so I'm glad that I can bring that viewpoint to Pollinator Partnership team. I have been very fortunate to work across the country with so many dedicated agencies and organizations. I started my career here in Indiana before moving up north. I've had the opportunity to move all over the country and work in all types of habitats, all in the pursuit of learning new approaches and conflicts and natural resources management. Luckily, I landed back here in Indiana with Pollinator Partnership, where I can share my love and nerddom of the outdoors with all of you. So because I work with Pollinator Partnership, I'll quickly go over what pollination is and why it's important to kind of help set the stage for the work that we do. and that Project Wingspan is doing. And then after that, we'll dive into more about Project Wingspan and program accomplishments. To kick things off, Pollinator Partnership's mission is to promote the health of pollinators, critical to food ecosystems through conservation, education, and research. We are the largest nonprofit in the world dedicated exclusively to the protection of pollinators and their ecosystems. Our goal is to promote the health of pollinators, from bees and bats to butterflies and birds, as well as the diverse habitats that they rely on and support. We aim to achieve this goal through a variety of initiatives like Project Wingspan that are all aimed at creating and enhancing pollinator habitat and providing vital nectar and forage plants. Some of the ongoing programming and information that we provide includes eco-regional guides, which were developed as a part of the North American Pollinator Protection Campaign to provide planting recommendations that are tailored to specific areas of the US. And Pollinator Week, which is actually going on right now. It started today on June 19th, and it will continue through the end of the week on the 25th. This is an entire week that's dedicated to raising awareness for pollinators, spread the word about what we can do to protect them. And this year, we'll be emphasizing the connections between climate and pollinators. We have popular events, which you can view on an interactive map on our website, including planting for pollinators, hosting garden tours. You can participate in online bee and butterfly identification workshops, and so much more. And again, you can learn all about Pollinator Week and activities in your area by visiting our website, pollinator.org. All right. So before I discuss Project Wingspan, let's quickly go over what pollination is to kind of set the stage, and what pollinators need to survive and be successful. In this way, I can help to build the framework for how Project Wingspan addresses the goals and the mission that we talked about earlier. So pollination, in the most basic sense, is the act of transferring grains of pollen from the male part of a flower, the anther, to the female part of the flower, the stigma. This results in the fertilization and the development of seeds, ideally. And wild plants have developed several mechanisms for dispersing their pollen to achieve successful reproduction, including self-fertilization. There's windblown pollen, much to the dismay of allergy sufferers, and sometimes even dispersal via water. Animal vectors, however, are some of the most efficient means that plants have developed to transfer their pollen to other flowers of the same species. And who are the pollinators that we're talking about? You know, they come in all sorts of shapes, colors, sizes. It's common to jump right to bees and honeybees specifically when thinking about pollinators, but many people don't realize that flower flies, moths, wasps, and so much more are also pollinators. Additionally, while insects tend to be where your mind goes when you hear the word pollinator, there are pollinating mammals, there's amphibians, lizards, birds. Bats in particular are an important and under-recognized pollinator to many plants and certain crops. So if you're going out for margaritas later, thank a bat for that tequila, is what I like to say. And amazingly, you know, there are over 4,000 native bee species in North America. The bees are the most efficient pollinators, and there's such great diversity. While honeybees are well known and have become a significant part of our agricultural and cultural structures, the importance of many species of the wild, non-domesticated bees is becoming more and more apparent as researchers learn more and more about their contributions to both the ecosystem and the agricultural sectors. So what do they need? How does a healthy ecosystem support pollinators? Much of it comes down to a diversity of plants, which is what I aim to kind of discuss more with Project Wingspan tonight. We need a continuous bloom throughout the year. We need flowers rich in protein and nectar. We need very specific host plants for faunal associations with certain animals and organisms, which we'll kind of talk about later. We need a mix of structures from woody to herbaceous subshrubs and shrubs and trees within the landscape. We also need habitat connectivity between larger swaths of quality habitat. We need pesticide-free areas and nesting and overwintering areas. Luckily, many of our native trees and shrubs, like oaks and spicebush, they not only improve the value of your land, but they also supply an assortment of functions for pollinators. Many butterflies and other Lepidoptera utilize these species as host plants to feed their young caterpillars. Leaf litter, dead trees, other woody debris also serve as nesting and overwintering sites for bees, the butterflies and moths, as well as a variety of other wildlife. All of that comes together to improve the biodiversity of the ecosystem that we're living in. And you can actually improve the quality of the habitat that you have simply by doing a little less yard work and allowing bare patches of soil in your garden. But sometimes we do need to intervene and restore or enhance habitat to improve these things. And finally, kind of my overview, why do we care? Well, essentially, it's because pollinators are critical to our landscapes and the ecosystem. For example, nearly 90% of the world's flowering plants need pollinators. Another example is where ecosystem biodiversity is enhanced when pollinators are present. They increase diversity by helping plants reproduce, which results in more species of flowers, trees, shrubs. All of that can establish in the landscape. And in turn, the plants support a broad array of species and provide critical habitat for nesting birds, rodents, other insects, not necessarily just pollinators, and the predators that feed on all of these other animals. Pollinators support an entire food web and are often an important source for food or other species as well. And finally, as I mentioned, our topic for Pollinator Week this year is climate. So the pollinators help to regulate climate by sustaining vegetation. While you may not think of pollinators as climate change superheroes, throughout their role in sustaining vegetation, they play a critical role in natural carbon sequestration. So this is where plants take in atmospheric carbon, they use it to build plant tissue and grow. And in turn, this carbon then can get trapped in the soil so that healthy plant communities are an important tool in the fight against climate change. So it's really cool. All right, so the reason that I am here today to talk about Project Wingspan. This is essentially a large-scale conservation program that's fueled by grassroots and volunteer actions. We engage landowners and land managers in ecotypic native seed collection to support both large and small-scale habitat enhancement projects. Project Wingspan addresses the need to increase the quality, quantity, and connectivity of imperiled pollinator habitats. It's accomplished through collaboration with a really strong coalition of partners in our target areas, which is just ever expanding, which I'm very excited about. We work with federal agencies, private companies, nonprofits. We work with local groups and individuals who are interested in supporting our work, like yourselves. So our current initiative is focused in Indiana and Illinois. However, the program has historically occurred throughout the Midwest and the Great Lakes area. We seek to target common native seed species that are either monarch larval hosts, which is the milkweed, or high quality pollen and nectar resources for the rusty patch bumblebee and other pollinator species. And again, so what do I mean by a larval host, and why do we specifically target milkweeds among other species for Project Wingspan? A host plant is one that an organism lives on and off of. So basically, animals can be picky eaters, right? Some depend on just one type of plant for survival, and enter the monarch, right? They're very specific. They are an iconic part of our natural heritage. Their immense and long migrations have captured the attention, much attention over the years. And we specifically target milkweeds because this is the only thing that monarch caterpillars will eat. The genus of plants provides nourishment, shelter, and more needed for the transformation from caterpillar into an adult butterfly. Unfortunately, milkweeds are rapidly disappearing from our landscape due to loss of habitat from land development, widespread herbicide applications, and more in areas that the monarchs live. But fortunately, milkweeds are easy to grow, and some even thrive in our harsh and suburban conditions. They thrive in full sun, in humid or dry conditions. They'll typically have a lovely rosy pink bloom, though some are white and some bright orange, and they make an excellent addition to large landscapes or your garden. Similarly, the rusty-patched bumblebee are reported to pollinate milkweeds, though they are a little less selective than the monarchs. The rusty-patched bumblebee was listed as endangered in 2017, which is likely due to the introduced pathogen and exposure to pesticides. They continue to be stressed by these pathogens and pesticides over time and continued habitat loss. So these bees, just like the monarchs, require floral resources from spring all the way through the year into fall. The species of plants that I was just talking about include those on this screen, alongside partners, botanists, ecologists, local volunteers, and so many more people. We have created a list of species that provide habitat, forage, and more throughout the growing season. Specifically, this includes 5 milkweed species that we're targeting. This has kind of changed over the years, but for our current initiatives in Indiana and Illinois, we're looking at the 5 species I have kind of identified in yellow here. And as you can see, we target a great diversity of other plants as well, which I think really helps to keep people engaged in learning throughout the year. Some of these are harder to collect. For example, wild geranium. It can take a little bit more planning and preparation. So the wild geranium, which blooms pretty early in the year, shoots its seeds all over when it's ready. And the seed head, before it does that, before it disperses the seed, needs to be wrapped with a collection baggie or similar before that happens. So it's really important to go out and scout for these plants before actually trying to do a collection. One of my favorites to collect is the wild bergamot. One, just because it smells great. Your hands are they smell wonderful and relaxing at the end of a long, arduous day of collecting seed. And 2, it's just really satisfying to collect that seed head, hold it in your hand and kind of crinkle it out and empty the seeds into your hand and just see all the little black seeds that you've just collected. So I really enjoy that aspect of this. And recognizing that existing habitats need to remain healthy for seed collection, which we'll kind of talk a little bit more about later, we do our best to follow a protocol to avoid adverse impacts to in situ populations. So I identified a couple of excerpts from our protocol that we share with volunteers. For example, we ask that no one collect more than 20% of the available seed on the day of collection. We ask that they collect randomly from a diverse selection of plants, regardless of characteristics are rare or common. We don't select only for the plants with the largest blooms or unique colors, for example. If the genetics of a specific population are unknown, we ask that people collect as broadly in an area as possible to collect the most diverse selection of material. When a population is abundant, however, we ask that individuals collect from every 5th plant, generally, as a way to kind of randomize your collections. And then finally, we prioritize sites where populations are of wild origin to kind of maintain ecotypic genetics and so much more. The protocol is included in trainings which everyone has open opportunity to engage in. All right, so how does it work? Native ecotypic wildflower seed is collected by teams of volunteers in target states, where these volunteers must all complete a multi-step online training, kind of that I've been hinting at, after which they can join an existing seed collection team or create a new one. These teams are managed by Project Wingspan state coordinators, so there's one in each state that we're working in, and gather seed from this pre-selected list that we just looked at of wildflower and milkweed species. On to the next phase. Once collected, the seed is marked with its date and location of collection and shipped to Illinois Department of Natural Resources Mason State Nursery in Topeka, Illinois. It's cleaned there, it's inspected for any unwanted species, and so much more. And a portion in this nursery is also diverted to being grown out as live plant plugs, which is really exciting as well. And finally, while all of this is going on, Pollinator Partnership staff are busy collecting habitat surveys from individuals and organizations that are interested in receiving seed and plant plugs, live plant plugs. Surveys are used to vet sites, choose qualified sites and projects to receive plant material. And with input from our partners, from our own P2 staff, Pollinator Partnership staff, excuse me, and land managers, seed and plugs are then assigned to a final list of vetted awardees and distributed for planting. In addition to the areas being directly enhanced with Project Wingspan materials, we gather letters of agreement from landowners to manage their land under best management practices, such as weed removal or integrated pest management, to ensure success of the habitat and of the program. All right, so step one, seed collection. As I mentioned, the native wildflower seed is collected by our volunteer teams in our target states. They all complete an online multi-step training module before joining a collection team. These trainings cover a wide breadth of topics, including plant identification. How do you identify each of the target species in our really big list? How do you scout for a viable and appropriate plant population? What are seed collection best management practices? Kind of what we talked about earlier with the protocol. How do you know that a seed is ready in the field to be collected? So visibility testing, there's a seed cut testing that you can do. We have a data collection protocol, which helps to identify where a seed was collected in an area so that we can track that throughout the program, and so it doesn't get mixed and sent off into the wrong state, kind of we'll talk about in a minute. And finally, how do we label, dry, and ship the seed in a consistent and effective and efficient manner? I really think this is a great program because upon completion of the training, you're awarded a certificate to demonstrate your new skills and knowledge. And who doesn't love a new certificate to add to their resume, right? The trainings are self-paced, they're completely free, they're publicly available online, even for those who just want to learn instead of actually going out and collecting seeds. And they're not limited to specific ages. So for example, this year we're engaging some school groups and eco-literacy programs throughout Indiana to participate in these efforts. There are a wide range of volunteer activities to choose from. And so to be successful in the program, we need helpers who like to hike, people who like to collect seeds, who like to clean seeds, mail seeds. We need photographers to snap pictures of wildflowers and seed heads. We need extroverts who like to organize seed collection events and talk to collection site managers and land managers. We also need kind of technology savvy people who can help to enter some of the collection information and data into a really simple GIS app, Survey 123, if you're familiar with that. And none of these positions ever fill up. We're always have room for more volunteers, and I welcome any help that we can get. As I mentioned, current seed collection activities are focused in Indiana and Illinois. However, past initiatives have occurred in Wisconsin, Michigan, Minnesota, Arkansas, Ohio, Pennsylvania, so kind of throughout the Midwest and the Great Lakes. Seed collection and distribution zones within each state are identified in these maps that I've shown here. And they're established utilizing a mixture of eco-regional and provisional seed zone boundaries with our partners and all of the people that we've worked with thus far. All native plant materials are that are generated from the seed collecting efforts will be redistributed within the same state collection zone in order to maintain this genetic variability and resilience across milkweed and forage plant populations and assist with the goal of addressing habitat loss in the Midwest. So, for example, seed collected in northern Indiana from the yellow zone would be shipped to our partners at the DNR Mason State Nursery in Illinois, and then returned back to a habitat enhancement project within the yellow zone in Indiana. And it's the same for Illinois. So seed collected in southern Illinois blue zone would be returned to that same color zone. The next phase is cleaning and grow out. So the volunteers have collected seed, they've saved their location data, labeled all collections using our predetermined and consistent naming convention, which is very important. They've sent the seed through the mail off into the unknown. What happens next? This is where our partnership with Illinois DNR Mason State Nursery comes into play. And so prior to storage and awarding, the collected seed must all be cleansed of dirt, of stems, of leaves, trash, unwanted noxious weed species that may have accidentally been included in a collection baggie from the field. Because we have a diverse species mix that we're identifying and collecting, we must also employ a variety of techniques to clean and condition the seed based on shape, on size, on texture, on weight, so many factors. Some of the seed will require, for example, a machine called a hammer mill to break up pods and shells, or a gravity separator to pull the less dense seed from the heavier chaff or the stuff that surrounds the seed. While others may need just more manual attention, just by hand cleaning of the seed. Once the seed is cleaned by our hardworking staff at the nursery and sometimes by volunteers, it's then stored or packaged for delivery to the habitat enhancement sites in the zone where it was collected. And the kind of the third phase of Project Wingspan, as I mentioned earlier, while all of this is going on, we're busy collecting habitat surveys from individuals and organizations that would like to receive seed or a live plant to supplement their projects. And the survey that we employ, it asks a whole variety of questions and asks for a lot of information, including, what is the size of your project? What is the current land use where your project is occurring? What types of land cover, or do you have forest, wetland, prairie, etc.? What is your approach to pest management on your property or within the project? What are current management practices or future management planning has occurred to kind of ensure success of the seed and of the plants that we're providing, and so much more. It's really detailed and quite comprehensive, and I think it does a great job at vetting the sites. So like I said, we vet the sites, we choose the most qualified to receive plant material, which is all kind of subject to how much we collect throughout the year. If we collect more seed, we can grow more plants, and in turn we can award more sites or award more seed and plants to a specific project. So in addition to the areas being directly enhanced with Project Wingspan materials, we gather letters of agreement from the landowners, from the land managers, to manage their land under best management practices such as weed removal and integrated pest management, kind of all the things that we talked about in the survey that we employ before selecting a site. And finally, at the end of this phase of work, all of the seeds and the live plants are sent to the approved projects. And I like to, just for fun, think about how small some of these seeds are and just how very many seeds can fit in a single shipping box, or how light some of these seeds are, like milkweed maybe. It really demonstrates the magnitude of the work that dedicated volunteers can accomplish. And I'll kind of come back to the weight when we talk about accomplishments later. So to assist the land managers who are receiving seed or live plant plug awards as a result of this project, we provide a series of technical trainings and workshops to really give the best chance of project and plant success. These technical trainings are not just for awardees though, they're for anyone who's interested. They cover, again, a wide range of topics from pollinator biology to management in agricultural schemes, to financial and technical resources available, to monitoring for long-term management that we ask everyone commit before receiving seed. In fact, we're actually currently hosting trainings in Michigan, Indiana, Illinois, and Ohio for agricultural landowners throughout those states. Each training will cover habitat creation, restoration, and enhancement, long-term management techniques, and they'll all include an exemplary native pollinator habitat walkthrough. In each training, we wrap with a field tour of successful habitat enhancement projects and a discussion of these best management practices for pollinator-friendly installation. So there are a lot of fun, a lot of great opportunities for people to ask questions, learn a little bit more of the technical side of what goes into this kind of work. The Project Wingspan program has undergone quite a few iterations. It was born in the Pollinator Partnership's Monarch Wings Across the Eastern Broadleaf Forest initiative. And since then, each grant that we've received has emphasized something slightly different so that we can best serve our community and the needs that we're seeing throughout as the project evolves. So from the beginning, it was just Project Wingspan. It was the first program that we did under the name Project Wingspan, where we were defining the program and building the partnerships that would help it to grow in the future. After that, we moved on to Project Wingspan Expansion and Connectivity in Arkansas, Illinois, Michigan, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. This was an expansion of the first program, so an expansion of Project Wingspan into areas that we had not worked before to extend our reaches with the partnerships that we built and our overall impact. After that, we moved on to Project Wingspan Agricultural Lands, which utilized the same collection protocols and strategies that we talked about earlier, but they emphasized agricultural landscapes for seed and plant awards and habitat enhancement. So those trainings that we're currently hosting that I just mentioned, those are a part of the Project Wingspan Agricultural Lands program. The current initiative, Project Wingspan Indiana and Illinois, is aiming to increase the program and partnerships and effectiveness in Illinois and Indiana, kind of as the name says. So then we have this other program called Project Wingspan Across Chicagoland, which is a bit different. And it doesn't rely on volunteer seed collection, but I wanted to briefly discuss it to give you kind of a well-rounded view of the full Project Wingspan program. And I'll provide a bit more detail on the next slide. So our current initiatives for Project Wingspan conclude in 2025, but that will hopefully not be the end. We intend to continue to develop the program into the future with help from grants, volunteer and partner support. I'm currently working on, for example, a couple of grants that would extend our reach into new communities and new states, and that would engage with new organizations in the Midwest. And it would also continue to build partnerships and presence in Indiana. So I'm hopefully proud to say that it's here to stay. So as I mentioned, Project Wingspan Across Chicagoland is a little bit different, where it seeks to amplify ecotypic native seed that, and excuse me, this slide shouldn't have the online training part there, but it seeks to amplify ecotypic native seed that's not readily available or hard to find, or is hard to find commercially. The program addresses threats of species extirpation from habitat loss, from degradation, from fragmentation, all by amplifying the supply of local genotype native seed to support habitat enhancement and restoration efforts. We employ and train native seed stewards. So where other Project Wingspan program works primarily with volunteers who donate their time, these are individuals that we bring in each year. We pay them and train them on a whole other suite of species. And they collect seed on approved properties within the Chicago wilderness region. Kind of on this map that I'm showing, it's probably a little small, but it generally covers northeast Illinois and extends a little bit into Indiana and Wisconsin. The stewards will collect, they'll clean the seed, they will send again to our partner agency at the Mason State Nursery, which will then redistribute the seed to participating land managers for restoration or enhancement in the Chicago wilderness region. The target plant species that we're looking at are rare and uncommon, though I feel it important to say that they're not threatened and endangered. They're species that are hard to find or harder to incorporate in a larger scale due to difficulty of germination, due to difficulty in amount of seed available, that kind of thing. The target species list was developed with local Chicago wilderness region land managers in the U.S. Forest Service, with forest preserve districts, with nonprofits, and land managers and ecologists, a whole suite of individuals that really help us to hone this list. So in looking at program successes, I think we can show that we've really done quite a lot. I show here the acres enhanced as a result of this program. Next is the pounds of cleaned seed. So remember I said that seed was really small, and it's fun to think about how much of that can fit into a packaging box. This is the pounds of cleaned seed without sticks, without leaves, just the seed. So I feel the numbers are quite impressive in that regard. And then followed by a count of live plants that have been distributed to real projects. They're in the ground, they're working to restore and enhance habitat. Yeah, and again, I note the clean seed really to emphasize the amount of collected seed that we're working with, especially considering the minute size of it. And hopefully these numbers will actually be much higher once we kind of reach the end of our grant period and all of the seed and live plugs have been awarded through Project Wingspan Agricultural Lands and the current initiative. Just a couple of other notes I wanted to point out here when you're looking at these numbers is in the first years of the program, we worked in a larger area with more states. So we had a much higher count of live plant plugs to distribute. And as time goes on, we've dialed in efforts to address more specific communities through each iteration of Project Wingspan. So some of the numbers here might look a bit odd, but that's just due to how the seed and live plant plugs are used in projects. As in, for complete restoration versus seed and plants that are used as a supplement to existing habitat enhancement activities across a broader area. The first Project Wingspan iteration was affected by the pandemic, meaning that our in-person workshops had to very quickly be modified into an online format. Our outreach planning needed a major overhaul. Seed collection activities, including the size of collection teams, the property availability, and more were incredibly impacted. However, considering those difficulties, I think the program was still wildly successful. and led to stronger communications and community connection in the subsequent iterations. Another note here is that acres enhanced that I've included in this table refers only to the land that received project-generated seeds and plugs. The total area that has been touched by this project that is under improved management through things like site visits and signed letters of long-term commitment that we talked about earlier is actually much higher, and it's in the hundreds of thousands of acres. It's incredible to me how many acres of land we've touched just in the Midwest and Great Lakes areas. A couple of other metrics that I'm not showing here that I do track are new or sustained jobs. So I mentioned we employ state coordinators in each state that we work in. We employ a plant nursery technician at Mason State Nursery who does all of the cleaning and growing and management of the seed, pretty much with very minimal supervision and oversight. So it's a lot of work for one person or a small team. And then we also have these trained seasonal native seed steward positions with Project Wingspan across Chicagoland. Another metric is the number of people reached. So just like the number of acres that we've touched, we've reached hundreds of thousands of people. And no, I'm not misspeaking, through our partnerships, through social media, we can track website visits, and webinar engagement, through volunteer engagement, email and listserv communications, through online trainings that we host. The list goes on, and the number continues to increase as we speak currently. And finally, you know, I do kind of try to track the success and the applicability of our trainings. So how did people respond to our technical consultations? Would they share it with others? That sort of thing. And in that way, we can continue to improve our trainings and the program for future iterations. So I know you're all asking yourselves, how do I get involved in such a fun and accessible program, right? It seems like a great opportunity to get out into the landscape, explore new areas, and to learn all you needed or maybe didn't want to know about native plants and plant identification. Well, the best way to start would be to visit the program website and start to review the training materials that I've kind of been talking about. Our state coordinators, including myself as the program manager and state coordinator for Indiana, are standing by to answer any questions, discuss the program in more detail. You know, seriously, if you have any questions, feel free to give me an email and we'll set up a call. I love to talk to people, and I love to talk to people about native plants, and we can go all day if you want. Actually, shameless plug, we are hosting a live virtual training event this Wednesday evening for those who'd like to jump right in. And this will help you get through the volunteer training and certification process. I know it's a little bit late in the day, but it's a great opportunity if you just like to jump right in. And you can contact me to learn more about that if you're interested. And finally, you know, ultimately, I wanted to end with kind of a positive note. We're building positive community, and collecting seeds is fun. It's an opportunity for people to come together under a common cause. It's something positive to do outdoors, something we can all take part in. It's a way to take care of the planet, escape from daily stress, and just find a little peace, as I find in this world. So that's kind of my positive note of the day. And with that said, I know I talked a little fast. I tend to do that when I'm presenting, but thank you for taking the time to join me today. This wasn't really a talk about how to grow native plants, but rather a look at how we are addressing certain natural resources concerns and how others can join our efforts. So again, thank you very much. And my email is at the bottom of the screen if you have any questions or would like to become involved.
Well, thank you so much, Andy. Really do appreciate it. I've been involved in Project Wingspan in the past. In 2021, I guess it was, we
Great.
did giant ironweed and common milkweed. And so we did that with the Sycamore Land Trust. And we didn't do one last year. I think it got away from us. But we are planning to do it again this year. But as you talked about your materials, they are fantastic. They are the best materials I've ever seen for doing this kind of community building and learning. I've having been engaged with the native seed communities quite a bit for the past 4 years, and looked at a lot of different programs. By far the very best program. So you all are doing great work. I know Sycamore was able to use some of the seed in the past, and then also we gave and I shipped a bunch of seed to you too. So we're hoping to do that again.
Yeah,
But
thank you so much.
yeah,
Sycamore has been a great partner throughout the program. I love to work with them and the volunteers that come through. And just to quickly
great.
touch on the training that we provide, I also have been involved in a number of programs in my career, and the materials that have been developed and continue to develop through Project Wingspan are incredibly in-depth. And like I said, may provide more than you want to know, but I think that's a great opportunity to extend your education.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Deb. Deb's been following the chat. I have been a little bit. I think we do have a question or two.
Yes, as a matter of fact, we do. And Andy, that was a great presentation, a lot of information, and I had no idea that it existed. So there's one more person you can add to your reach, right? Woohoo! So the question, before I get to one of the questions, I want to do a preliminary to it, is that a landowner submits their the questionnaire that they want to be participating in this program. They get selected, and then do they get to choose the type of plant plugs, or is that up to the program to say, hey, we really need ironweed, right? Or we need culver root, or we need pokeweed kind of
Great
thing.
question. Yeah, so the plant awards are determined on it's kind of a back and forth conversation between the land manager or landowner and myself as the program manager. And I also work with our restoration ecologist with Pollinator Partnership to really identify what would be best for your habitat, what you do need. So we don't just ship you a bunch of plants and say deal with it, right? We really hope that you will have a little bit of an opportunity to learn about the plants that we're sending to you so that you can be more successful.
Good.
And landowners that are interested in receiving seed, I should note that for the most part, we've closed the surveys for this iteration of Project Wingspan. This because we were flooded with entries, and we're kind of vetting those currently. However, for future iterations of the Wingspan, as we get more and more grants, we will reopen that habitat survey to get people involved.
Okay, great. So would then a landowner collect, so we had a question from Pamela asking, would the landowner be collecting from their own garden, from the plugs, or would they be directed to go in other locations?
Yeah, so it's kind of a yes and no. A lot of people with larger properties do prefer to go out on their own property by themselves and collect. We do ask that you try to target a population of species that is, I think it's at least 50 plants in a given population, and follow all of the best management practices that we kind of talked about. And to the best of your ability, try to collect from plants that are local to your area. For example, if the plant was grown from seed that came from a different state, while it is our target species, it's not the ecotypic in situ genetic diversity that we're specifically looking for. So we do kind of ask that you know the management history of the land, of the plants that you're collecting from. If you don't know the background of your plants, we can have a conversation about how long they've been there. If they've been there for 7 years, obviously that plant, those plant genetics will be successful in this area, and potentially we can collect from them. But generally, because we're redistributing to partners and to a whole lot of people, we try to keep it as ecotypic as possible. I hope that answers your question.
I think so. And if Pamela has a follow-up to that, I'm sure she'll add to the chat. So another question is, for the individual gardener, is it good to collect seeds from the wild, or is it better to not collect them at all?
So, as with all things, when you're collecting seed from the wild, you need to make sure that you have permissions. With private landowners, if you're collecting on your own property, it's a little easier. In some instances, we work with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, for instance. And so there's certain protocols, permissions, and permits that I need to complete in order to get volunteers out to collect that seed. So I think collecting from the wild is great, as long as you're doing it sustainably, with best management practices, and very importantly, as long as you have permission.
Yeah, there's a key right there, right?
Yes.
Yep. So back to Pamela, she was also asking, can a city or a neighborhood apply to get plants? So I would presume that might be even like a whole neighborhood and their HOA wants to get involved.
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting opportunity to get more urban and suburban communities engaged, which is actually the focus of a grant that I'm currently writing. So thanks for setting the stage for that one. But our plants that we distribute, the seed that we distribute, we have a certain acreage that we have to hit for our grant reporting, our metrics. And so, we do try to have bigger projects, but I also like to include the smaller ones, especially at scale like this. So I also want to note that a lot of Project Wingspan work is meant to supplement ongoing or pre-planned habitat enhancement and restoration projects. We just can't collect enough seed to be used for a restoration in its own right. So if a neighborhood or a city are currently working on habitat enhancement projects and programs, certainly it's something that Project Wingspan could help supplement and increase the genetic diversity of the plants that they're already putting in.
Okay. Yeah, that would make sense. I know that a lot of places would love to have as much free seed or free plugs as possible when they have a huge project, and you want to spread the wealth, so to speak. To follow up on the question, was it Julie? I've since forgotten the name of your mother. To complete the question, so as far as collecting seed from the wild or not collect them, then if you were to collect from the wild, would you be okay and then growing them in your own garden plot?
Yeah, every species has its own very specific habitat requirements. Again, so it's kind of the same answer, where if you're collecting sustainably, you're not touching threatened and endangered species, you have the appropriate permissions and any permits that are required completed and in your hand. Absolutely, you can grow those in your home garden plot if you're familiar with stratification of the seed, and you can help them to grow and be successful.
Good. I don't see any other questions. I do have a question, my own. I didn't put it in there. So I have a pollinator garden, and I'm getting better as far as not trying to have one of this, one of this, one of this, one of this, right? and a swath of New England aster, have the goldenrod, and have more diversity as far as bloom time. And you mentioned that earlier. What I've noticed is, as a homeowner, I want to keep it somewhat tame instead of if I let them, they'll grow everywhere and grow extremely tall. So my question is, particularly with the New England aster, I have some that I did not prune back that are already in bloom. And I suspect that it is in bloom because we had a very dry and maybe even hot May, right?
Right, yeah.
And it's tricked it to thinking that it is late July or August, and so now it's in bloom. So are there things that your program helps landowners who gets plugs to monitor, and maybe, hey, you need to be cutting back your asters or your goldenrods so they don't start blooming too soon? Back to the climate changes.
Sure, that's a great question. Project Wingspan itself, I'm going to say, doesn't really address individual plant management. The famous Chelsea chop, I think they call it,
Yeah.
of certain plants. What we will do is give you kind of ways to help manage your property as a whole. And then we can answer specific climate and habitat needs of a plant. But as far as individual species and maintaining flowering throughout the year, that's something that some of our eco-regional guides that I kind of plugged in the very beginning might touch on. But it's not something that's specific to Project Wingspan, unfortunately.
So if I have New England aster that I didn't prune in bloom, I suspect in other areas it is in bloom, which means the seed collection period would be
right. Yeah.
on time. So what happens if you are sending out people, or the volunteers are going with the anticipation of collecting seed and it's not there?
Well, hopefully, I do ask that before people go out for a seed collection event, that they have scouted an area beforehand to kind of help identify when a plant might be flowering. So hopefully in the case of this New England aster, we would have noticed that it was flowering maybe earlier, and that hopefully we could identify that it would go to seed earlier, and then get people out there. If we do get a group together, say at a local parks and recreation district, and our one target species is past seed, the seed's gone, we can't collect it. There's other activities that you can do. If you have the target species list with you, you can perhaps scout for another species that we're looking for, and maybe plan another trip in the future. Or you can maybe you can take your own note and keep an eye on it for next year for collection, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You just kind of have to wing it sometimes, right?
Yeah. Yep. You have to wingspan it, right?
Well, I think, Andy, that wraps up any questions. One more came in just listening to the Urban Farm podcast. An urban farmer in Columbus, Ohio, Zone 5A, recorded temps that put them into a Zone 7-8 for the past 10 years, which, we're hearing that more and more, that with the climate change, plants that we necessarily didn't think we could grow are able to grow now. And I think that's where that the dynamics of certain plants that are typically, let's say, southern Indiana, are migrating up just because it's warmer, and I don't know if it's animals or humans or who's bringing the plants further up or south, but I guess that is an issue that we probably have to address at some point. But well, Bill, I think, and Andy, that is all the questions that we have. I'm sure if there were any that come up afterwards, they have your email information, Andy, and other contact info.
Great. Thanks so much for having me.
Excellent. Well, let me go ahead and wrap things up. I will. Now, if you have any additional questions regarding the presentation or native seed communities, you've got the link for Andy in the chat. You've got some of our links as well. I believe, Deb, you put those in there also. We do invite you to be involved with the Facebook group, Indiana Native Seed Communities. If you're on Facebook, and Andy, that training you talked about would be ideal to post there, because we've got a couple thousand people nearly that are following the group. And pictures and videos and a lot of that kind of thing is welcome. As has been our pattern, we've been doing these on a monthly basis, and we will be having Will Drews in July on the 25th, and it'll also be at 7 p.m. It's a Tuesday. Will is the Natural Resources Specialist for Knox County Soil and Water Conservation District, and he will be talking about the Knox County Cooperative Invasive Species Management Areas Native Plant Propagation Program, as well as plant sales that they do from the plants they grow. And I've been engaged with their work, and they really are doing some terrific stuff down there in southwest Indiana. Thanks again, Andy, for your terrific session, very informative. And again, Pollinator Partnership is a terrific organization. And if you're not already involved, I highly recommend folks doing so. Thanks, Deb, for helping with the chat and helping with technical aspects and being my backup in case we have any technical issues. So it was good to see you all. We'll sign off for now. Happy growing natives from seed. Thanks so much, everyone. Bye-bye.